Okay.
Good morning, fans of Blue Smoke and Black Ink. 30-second chats with some of America's finest writers. Today, for our inaugural issue, we have one of my oldest pals and one of the best writers, Joe Citro. Joe, how you doing?
Jim, how are you? Good to see you.
Great to
Good to
see you.
see you.
Great to see you. Let's get the business out of the way first, and then we'll start hacking her. Oh, you got a cigar. I should have brought, I have
Yeah.
one right here. Yeah. Let's get the business out of the way first. You've got a new book out and it's terrific. Tell us about it.
Well, it's right here. Can you see that?
Yeah, hold it up to the camera.
Okay. Yeah, hot off the press.
What's it called?
It's called False Memories, and it's kind of an experimental thing for me. I've never done a book quite like this. It's a collection of short stories, but it's also a memoir. And what I tried to do was, you know, a lot of times when you're talking to readers, they'll say, "Well, why did you think of that?" Or how'd you get an idea like that? Or where'd that come from? So what I'm doing is I'm publishing the short stories, but I'm also doing lengthy essays about each one, trying to track where the story originated, what inspired it, what was the igniting thought, um, and how I put the story together. And the premise of the book, the reason it's called False Memories, is that I've sort of concluded that that's what short stories are. They're memories. They're little bits of your childhood or your experience growing up that are morphed or molded into fiction. So fiction is in effect memory, but it's manipulated memory. It's false memory. Some of
Yeah,
the
I
stories,
have to tell you, I love the short stories, but I enjoyed your memories about them just as much. And some of the reactions you got from the readers were really strange. Can you share
yeah,
one or two
yeah,
of
there
those
was
with
there
us?
was some
Those were
awful
as interesting as the stories.
there was some awful strange stuff. I think it was you who pointed out that this book might be good for people who are in the process of becoming writers, because it also sort of tracks my well, I found I just by chance I found the first short story I had ever had published, and I also found the first short story that I ever sold. And then I have a group of stories that were done after I was a professional writer. And
Yep.
those it's a whole collection. It spans my whole career as a short story writer, such as it is. Yeah, the first one that was ever published actually I thought it was going to get me in trouble because it was while I was in high school, and it it was kind of critical of religion. It was kind of a boy's take on the second coming, sort of. It was quite horrific, I think, and it was probably the work of a sort of I don't know, a teenage mind, I guess. It's juvenilia, I guess is what we call it. But it really did forecast what was to come. But but I got when the story was published, I got invited to come to the local Baptist Bible school. And I thought I was going to be the victim of 2,000 years later, I was going to be the victim of another crucifixion. But he were actually very cordial and wanted to know where the story was. They didn't make any attempts to save me or anything like that, but they did give me an example of how polite the Baptists are and how people from different positions can actually talk with each other in a civil way. It was a very, very good experience. I wish I could remember it more clearly, but God, Jim, that was a long time ago.
And that's what turned you to the religious life you've led since then, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I became a monk shortly after that.
Hey, listen, I got to complain about one thing. As usual, you don't take my writing advice. I told you to leave that word eldritch out of the subtitle of the book. Tell us what the subtitle is and what the heck that word means. I'd never heard of it.
Well, God, I'm surprised you admit that on your own podcast. Hey, yeah, yeah. The full title is um, um, "False Memories and Eldritch Interludes," and the false memories, of course, are the stories, and the interludes are the essays that connect the stories. But what's Eldritch? Eldritch is thrown in there for the readers of H.P. Lovecraft. It was a word that he didn't invent it, but he used it a lot and made it popular among those people who read his fiction.
Oh.
Things that are strange or weird, he described as eldritch. So eldritch interludes. I threw that into the title because a lot of my stuff is really influenced by Lovecraft.
Would
Uh,
you say he's your biggest mentor or influence as a writer, Lovecraft?
no, I sometimes describe him as my first writing teacher because um, I read the first Lovecraft story when I was in the sixth grade. My my teacher, Mr. McCarthy, who was a wonderful teacher, said, I know you like weird stuff, so try this. And he handed me a book of Lovecraft stories, and the story that I read was called The Dunwich Horror. I'd never read anything like that before. It really made me sit up and take notice and read more Lovecraft. And when I got to another story called the Whisperer in Darkness, that's the one that really opened my eyes because the Whisperer in Darkness took place mostly in Vermont, my home state. I'm talking to you from Vermont, Jim.
Wow.
Yeah, and it takes place in Vermont. And what it triggered in me was the realization that you don't really have to go to foreign lands. You don't have to go to Transylvania or anything like that to find horrific situations. They're right underfoot. They're right here in Vermont. And that is really when I started to see Vermont as a location for my stories. And all my novels and short stories take place in Vermont. I'm trying to
Oh, yeah.
Vermont on the map, but take it off the map.
Yeah, well, I should remind our viewers that you have a huge career as a horror novelist, The Gore, Lake Monsters, etc., and those were all set in Vermont. But later on in your writing career, you became kind of a, I don't know if you call it a folklorist or an investigator, but you loved investigating these haunted houses of Vermont, these covered bridges of Vermont, these curses of Vermont, and that's really become your second career, hasn't it?
Well, yeah. My last novel came out in 1994,
Wow.
and that was called Deus Ex, The Reality Conspiracy. Um, yeah, you've got the original hardcover. That's been reprinted and has stayed in print one way or another since then. But that was my last novel. And the other ones have been being reprinted. This is the Gore, for example. Um, and it's not about blood and gore. It's about a place in Vermont's fabled Northeast Kingdom where um, weird things happen. And yeah, um, what
We've
was
we've spent a lot of times, Joe, wasting time smoking cigars together. You gave me a list of topics we could talk about, and one of the first ones is the time we decided to build a fence in your backyard. I showed up at 8 o'clock in the morning. By the time we had breakfast, smoked a cigar, talked a while, it was lunchtime and we hadn't started yet. That's how we typically operate.
Well, how long did it take us to get that fence up?
Years.
10 years, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. We get things done. It just takes us a little while.
But we had a wonderful
Another
time.
suggestion you have as your number five, the proper way to introduce a speaker. Can you tell us the story? Because we're getting into the buffoonery area of this podcast now. Oh, you're lighting up already. Whoa. Uh,
Well, yeah,
how did you
um,
introduce me at the League of Vermont Writers?
right. Um, Jim and I used to go to these meetings of the League of Vermont Writers. It was a wonderful organization and very, very encouraging to people who were taking their first baby steps into the field of writing. And Jim and I would meet at these, and we showed up together at one, and the president came running over to me and said, "Our speaker didn't show up. I can't remember who was scheduled, but what are we going to do?" And I said, "Fear not, Jim will speak." And so the president said I should introduce Jim. So I got up onto the stage and I said, "And now here's a man who needs no introduction." And I walked off the stage.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for that no
I left him up
introduction.
there cold.
I remember it even a bit
Who
more
handled it?
vividly. I remember Citro stepping forward and saying, "Don't worry, ladies, I'll solve this for you. Jim will give the speech." And
Yeah.
then afterwards, I muddled through something for 20 minutes. And afterwards, they rushed up to you and they said, "Oh, thank you, Joe. You saved us once again." Boy, I don't know how you get away with it, Citro. You're amazing.
No, I don't know. Those days are long gone, Jim. I don't get away with anything anymore.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I know you're usually busy during Halloween season, October, and since I live in Salem, Vermont, Salem, Massachusetts now, I know how that is. But are you cutting back a bit on your speeches and your appearances during
Well,
Halloween season?
yeah, I, I'm not going to do any this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to just lay low and take it easy and work on my new book. I got another book in progress already,
Ooh,
so
can you
um,
tell us about that? What a novel or what? What are you doing?
no, I'm getting out of the supernatural business and folklore business. This is more of a history, I guess. It's you know, I was I live in Windsor, the birthplace of Vermont, and also in town is what was one of the oldest prisons in the country. Um, I think it goes back to 1808 or something like that. It's very, very old, and no longer used as a prison, but it's still there. The building is still there. The fence is still there. You can still walk by it. And one day when I was walking by it, I got this inspiration. I was looking at the prison, and I was thinking, well, Jesus, this is where executions used to take place. So I wonder, let me ask you this, Jim. There's no way for you to know this. So you either know it or you got to take a guess, and you're going to have to take a guess. How many people do you think were executed, legally executed in Vermont in its entire time as a state?
Okay,
Executed.
I could do a sidetrack on that. I did a book called 40 Steps to Old Sparky about a guy who was executed in New York State,
Yep.
and the number I think was above 80. I'm going to guess for Vermont, two. How close am I? Over and under?
You're under, but it's a good guess. And the only one who's guessed lower was the guy who guessed one just yesterday. But I was
Uh-huh.
asked that leading into my explanation of this new book because there were 26
Wow.
in the whole history of the state, and
That's 20% of the population for crying out loud. Wow.
if only, and 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 we never went in for any of those exotic sorts of executions. We didn't get into the firing squads or the lethal injections or anything like that. Around here, it was just hanging, and
Ah.
electrocution.
And what are the time frames of that first and last of those, Joe?
Well, the last, and I'm happy with this. I'm happy to say this that the last was in 1954,
Wow.
and that was in the electric chair, and we don't do it anymore. I like to think we've outgrown that. Um,
Yeah.
I part of the problem I'm having writing the book is I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to position myself in the book because what my point of view is going to be because I'm, I'm absolutely opposed to capital punishment, absolutely. And I have two reasons for that. One is probably enough. The first reason is probably enough, and that is I just think it's wrong. I think it's morally wrong to do it. So I'm against it. But the other reason is the possibility of error is great. And in the history of the United States, one wonders how many people have been put to death wrongly, got the wrong guy. So
Yeah.
for those two reasons, I don't think we should do it. So I'm writing a book about those 26 cases, um,
Oh.
the person involved, the crime, possibly the trial, and the execution. That's what the book's going to be. It's going to be called. This is a working title. It's Until You Are Dead, Murder and Execution in Vermont, or something like that.
Oh, that sounds terrific, Joe. What a great idea. Almost more of a true crime book than a
Yeah,
mystery book.
I think
As a side note, I found out when I was researching mine, the reason the electric chair is a chair instead of having the person stand up like or firing squad or lying down like injection is it was invented by a dentist and he put his love of dentistry together with his love of electricity and invented the electric chair. But that sounds terrific. That's going to be a great book. Any time frame on that, Joe? Probably not.
kind of a loose time frame. It's going to be my fall and winter project, so I'm thinking sometime in the spring.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of material available about these various executions, and the newspapers of their day covered them pretty thoroughly. So I'm going to be able to do all the research without leaving my recliner,
Oh,
actually.
that's great. You know of a website called newspapers.com, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got those. I've got much of the research done already. Um, I do need to make contact with a few people and do interviews to kind of put the book into the here and now. For example, one of the former wardens of the prison is still living in town,
Oh,
and his
wow.
father was also a warden. So I'm guessing his father was probably the warden at the time of that last execution. So I think he would be I think he'd be willing to give me an interview, you know.
Oh, gee, that sounds terrific. As you know, Joe, I'm always a little bit to the right of you, a bit more conservative than you are. And I agree with, I'd say, about 98% of your views on capital punishment. But every so often, I'll watch a video or read a book about someone who's just so bad
Yeah,
that I think of an execution as being like weeding a garden, just making humanity better by actually killing somebody. I know that's kind of cruel, but that's the way I think about it. I want to get on to another topic that I was hoping we talk about. I've watched a lot of Netflix and read a lot of books on haunted houses, alien abduction, things like that. And I always start thinking, when you cover these, I don't want you to mention any names, but you've run across some real scam artists who are just using all of these to scare people and to make money. Isn't that true?
that is true. Why can't we use names?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, that's fine.
Well, when I this is another thing I'd like to write a book or a chapbook or something about. I, you know, I got all these projects for books, and I have to kind of look at how many years I might have left to do
You got
writing,
time.
you know. I it's but this was something that happened in the 1980s when I was first starting to be published as a writer. I had this literary agent who was selling my novels, but also was representing this couple from Connecticut named Ed and Lorraine Warren. There now, if you don't want me mentioning names, you can just go and blip those out. But she got it into her head because I was writing these horror novels, and she, being my agent, thought I was pretty good at it. So these Ed and Lorraine Warren were looking for someone to ghostwrite their books because they don't write, they couldn't write, and so she paired me up with them, and I at that point I didn't have any real strong feelings one way or another about the supernatural. So I sort of welcomed the opportunity to work with these people because they were going to show me some real supernatural stuff. So I went down to Connecticut to, I think I spent a week with them or, the better part of a week anyway, and tagged along with them and went to their haunted museum and they were a wonderfully entertaining couple. They were like somebody's grandparents or something like that. They lived in a house full of little decorative trinkets, and we we'd sit at the kitchen table, and Ed Warren would tell me these horrible stories about his confrontations with evil and demonic spirits and wayward ghosts, and he'd be saying, and then the priest picked up the crucifix and it exploded in his hand. And then he'd stop and he'd say, Lorraine, could you bring me in a couple more of those cookies? So there's this weird juxtaposition of the mundane and the horrific. But after I left there and I was um, sort of halfway convinced that this supernatural stuff went on, but I didn't see any evidence of it. Um, where are your files? Well, we don't keep files. Um, you know, uh, there was no substance to anything they were telling me.
Whoa.
And I later, I said, Ed, I live in Vermont. I can be here if I drive fast in 3 hours. The next time you're in a house where you're seeing Pepsi bottles floating around, give me a call. I get here. I'll get here. I want to see it. Well, it turned out that they didn't so much want me to write a book about the Warrens. They wanted me to take the Warrens' oral stories and transfer them into horror fiction.
Oh, wow.
But there was no investigative part of it. I didn't have an opportunity to investigate the sites or interview the witnesses. I did one phone call with a witness who claimed that she had been anally interfered with by a demonic spirit, and and I said and I said, well, do you keep a record of this? Oh yeah, I got it on my computer. Could you send me, maybe print it out or send me the computer file? Well, the demon hit the demon hit the delete switch.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay. So it was just this sort of thing, right? One thing after another. Um,
Boy.
they claimed that one of the stories Ed Warren told me was how they had gone to England and solved the case of these children that were being possessed by a demonic spirit. And a little investigation on my part, just a little, revealed that they had never done any investigation.
Wow.
Warren was telling me these stories about how he would be alone in this haunted house where these children were being possessed, and the demon would talk to him. And they said, "Well, you couldn't see the demon? No, no, it's just in the air somewhere." Well, what did it say, Ed? And he said, "Awful things, awful things, awful things." So I,
Wow.
I had to write this up, and or I was going to have to write it up. So I said, Ed, you got to tell me what did the demon say? I mean, if he's saying things to you, um, I need to write about that. And he said, well, you're the writer, make something up.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah.
At some point, although I left there with my head spinning, um, a little quiet contemplation made it clear that I didn't want to get involved with this project at all.
Yeah, you backed off of that then, huh?
Oh, pardon me?
You backed off from that project. You didn't want
Did.
the job.
Yeah, I did. I did. I got out of there.
And sometimes it's not a question so much of um, fraud, but just ignorance. I don't know if you remember this story, but do you remember telling me a story about the time you were at a seance and the medium contacted the spirit world? And the one question the guy sitting next to you asked, can you tell us that story?
Oh God, that was hilarious. In the case of the warrants, it is fraud. I know you said it's not so much fraud, it's ignorance, it's fraud.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, in this case, I won't mention any names. Um, but there was a professor at UVM who was doing some research into the occult and spirit mediums and contacting the dead and all those things that were so very popular during the American age of spiritualism. So he was having these meetings at his house, and a bunch of people would come, and he would have some mediums there, or maybe is it mediums or media? He would have
Yeah.
a couple of people who were in touch with the higher powers, and then there would be the rest of us. And I can't remember who the other people were, but I was there with a woman friend of yours and mine, and let's see what happened. Are you getting weird signals on your screen?
I just had something that I've only got 10 minutes left, but that's all I got. I
Oh,
wouldn't worry about it. We have to cut this a bit short, but go on with your story.
well, these women were in touch with their higher powers, whatever they are, whether they're interior or exterior, I don't know. But the group was given an opportunity to ask the higher powers a question. So, I was thinking, what am I going to ask? And maybe everybody else was thinking the same thing because there was absolute silence from the group. So, so this guy who was leading this meeting said, "Well, I got a friend who was going to come tonight, but he did not. Let me give him a call. He might have a question." And he got the question, and the question was, I seem to have a hole in my swimming pool and water's leaking out. Hey, I can't find the hole. Tell me where the hole. Here,
I
here's a
I
group
love,
of people and a guy who have contact with the higher powers, the
yeah.
extremes of the universe, the brilliance of the unwritten, unseen records of all mankind. And this guy wants to know why his swimming pool is leaking. That is just hilarious to me. And
I love that. Yeah,
I
I love
couldn't
that
look at
story.
my friend. I couldn't look at my friend. And she told me later that she couldn't look at me because if we had looked at each other, it would have been all over. We would have been exorcised from the gathering.
Probably. Well, let's face it, Joe. Maybe one day when both of us meet our makers, we'll find out the answer to that eternal question, where is the leak in that guy's swimming pool? Hey, Joe, it's just been great talking to you. I've just loved it. I could go on for hours, but I've got to keep these chats to 30 minutes, both for
Can't you start
interest
another
sake.
one?
I
Can't,
mean,
can't
you,
you
you're
start
you're
another?
fascinating, but some of these poets, they can get pretty boring after 30 minutes. I don't want to offend anyone, but go ahead. What were you going to say before we
I was
sign off?
gonna say, can't you just? I mean, this one is going to end, but can't you just start another one and have extend it, sort of? I don't know.
Oh,
I
I don't know. I've never thought of
podcast.
that. Are you up for it?
Well, sure. I mean, if you want to, if there's any more you want to talk about,
Oh, okay, let's do that. Let me end this meeting and then I'll get back to you and right away and we'll see if we can go on with this. But this has just been great. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
thanks, Jim, and I'll see you later, maybe.
Yeah, I'll talk to you in a minute, I think.
Know if the recording worked.
Yeah, I'll check the recording and then I'll get back.
Okay, see ya.
So long, buddy.